The emergency beacon cut through the cosmic static like a blade through silk, its desperate signal reaching the Galactic Council chambers on Centauri Prime 3 cycles after the colony had gone silent. Ambassador Kethver's forearms trembled. As he processed the transmission from Kepler 442b, a planet so hostile that even the hardy Vorthik mining crews had abandoned it after losing half their number to the acidic storms and crystalline predators that roamed its surface. "The situation is beyond critical," Admiral Zexfel announced to the assembled representatives, his scaled hide shifting to deeper shades of purple as stress hormones flooded his system. Colony Outpost 77 Alpha has been completely cut off for 12 standard rotations. The last transmission indicated catastrophic failure of their environmental shields during a Class 9 acid storm. The holographic display showed Kepler 442b in all its terrifying glory. Atmospheric readings painted a picture of a world where the very air could dissolve most known materials within hours. The surface temperature fluctuated wildly between freezing and boiling, while electromagnetic storms rendered most technology useless. Massive crystalline creatures, some the size of small starships, had been observed moving through the toxic landscape like living mountains of death. The colony housed over 3,000 souls, Kethver added, his translator struggling to convey the emotion in his native tongue. Researchers, their families, support staff, all from various member species of the Council. "We cannot abandon them." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber, but it was tinged with hopelessness. The Zerathi delegates' bioluminescent patches flickered in patterns that conveyed deep concern. The Mokari representative's tentacles coiled tightly around his speaking staff. Every species present understood the terrible mathematics of the situation. "What military assets do we have in that sector?" asked General Hurdock, the Bresson commander whose species had evolved on high-gravity worlds and was considered among the most resilient in known space. Admiral Zexfel's response came heavy with defeat. "The nearest Council fleet is 67 light-years away. Even at maximum warp, they couldn't reach the system for another 18 rotations. By then, any survivors will have been dead for days." "What about the Korthani?" someone suggested. The Korthani were known for their incredible endurance and ability to survive in toxic environments. "Already tried?" the Admiral replied. "They lost 2 scout ships just trying to breach the planet's atmosphere. Their hulls were dissolved before they could even attempt landfall." The chamber fell into a grim silence. Kepler 442b was a death world beyond the survival capabilities of any known species in the galaxy. The crystalline predators alone could tear through military-grade armor like tissue paper, and that was assuming anyone could survive the acidic atmosphere long enough to encounter them. Then, from the back of the chamber, a small voice spoke up. "What about the humans?" The suggestion came from Ambassador Yuthara, whose species had only recently joined the Galactic Council. Her comment was met with a wave of confused chittering and bioluminescent flashing from the other delegates. "Humans?" Admiral Zexfel's head crest flattened against his skull in the equivalent of a frown. "You mean those primitive newcomers from the Sol system? The ones who haven't even developed proper energy shielding yet?" "With respect, Admiral," Yuthara continued, her voice gaining strength, "my species has had some contact with human traders and diplomats. They possess certain unusual characteristics that might be relevant to this situation." Kethver's forearms gestured dismissively. "Ambassador, humans are barely beyond their industrial age. They still use chemical propulsion for much of their space travel. How could they possibly succeed where our most advanced civilizations have failed?" But Yuthara was not deterred. She activated her personal datapad, projecting information into the chamber's central display. "Human biology is remarkably adaptable. Their homeworld, Earth, is what they call a death world by their own standards. They evolved alongside predators, diseases, and environmental hazards that would terrify most of our member species." The data showed Earth's statistics. Gravity nearly twice that of most habitable worlds. An atmosphere containing a highly reactive gas that was toxic to most life forms. Weather patterns that included destructive storms, temperature extremes that could flash freeze or incinerate. And yet, humans had not just survived but thrived on this hostile planet. Furthermore, Yathara continued, humans possess an unusual psychological trait. When faced with impossible situations, particularly when others are in danger, they seem to become more capable rather than less. They have a saying, hold my beer and watch this, which roughly translates to I'm about to attempt something that defies all logic and reason, but somehow might work. General Herdick leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. As a species that had evolved on a heavy-gravity world themselves, the Bresen could appreciate toughness when they saw it. What kind of technological capabilities do they possess? Crude but effective, Yathara admitted. Their materials science is centuries behind ours, but they compensate with redundancy and what they call duct tape solutions. They build things that shouldn't work according to our engineering principles, but somehow do work when everything else fails. Admiral Zexthal's scales had shifted to a skeptical blue-green. Even if all of this is true, they don't have ships capable of reaching Kepler 442b. The nearest human vessels are in their own solar system, thousands of light-years away. Actually, Yathara said with what might have been a smile on her species' features, there is a human exploration vessel currently docked at Waystation Gamma 7, only 12 light-years from the Kepler system. The ship is called Absolutely Nothing Can Go Wrong, which I'm told is typical human naming convention. A moment of stunned silence followed this revelation. Then Admiral Zexthal activated his communications array. Get me a direct line to Waystation Gamma 7 immediately. Priority Alpha clearance. As the connection was established, every delegate in the chamber found themselves holding their breath. They were about to request help from a species most of them considered primitive, asking them to attempt a rescue. Mission that their most advanced civilizations had declared impossible. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the interior of what appeared to be a human vessel's bridge. A figure in a blue uniform looked up from what seemed to be a cup of some dark liquid, steam rising from its surface. Council control? This is Captain Sarah Chun of the UES Absolutely Nothing Can Go Wrong. I understand you folks need some help with what my people would call a situation. Captain Sarah Chun took another sip of her coffee as Admiral Zexthal explained the situation on Kepler 442b. Her expression remained remarkably calm for someone being asked to fly into what most species considered a literal hell dimension with teeth. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Sarah said, leaning back in her captain's chair. You've got 3,000 people trapped on a planet where the rain can dissolve starship hulls. The wildlife is the size of skyscrapers and just as friendly, and the weather makes Hurricane Katrina look like a gentle spring breeze? That is essentially correct, Captain, Admiral Zexthal replied, though his translator seemed to struggle with several of Sarah's references. We understand if you feel this mission is beyond your capabilities. Perhaps we could discuss alternative. Hold. Up there, Admiral, Sarah interrupted, raising one hand. I didn't say we couldn't do it. I just wanted to make sure I had the parameters right before we start planning. She turned to someone off-screen. Rodriguez, fire up the fabricators and get Jenkins down to the supply bay. We're going to need some modifications. Behind her, the bridge of the human vessel buzzed with sudden activity. Crew members who had been casually monitoring systems suddenly became focused, moving with purpose and efficiency that surprised the watching delegates. Captain, Admiral, Zexthal said carefully, I must stress the extreme danger involved. The atmospheric composition alone, Admiral, with all due respect, Sarah cut him off again. My species has been living on a death world for about 200,000 years. We've got some experience with hostile environments. She pulled up Earth's statistics on her display. Our home planet has killer storms, predators that hunt in packs, diseases that can wipe out entire populations, and weather that can go from freezing to broiling in a matter of hours. Plus, our atmosphere is 21% oxygen, which I'm told is basically rocket fuel to most of you folks. The assembled delegates exchanged glances. They had known Earth was dangerous, but hearing it described so casually was unsettling, Sarah continued. The way I see it, Kepler 442b is just Earth with a few extra features. Sure, acid rain is nastier than regular rain, but we've dealt with acid rain before during our industrial period. Giant crystal monsters sound scary, but we've got giant monsters on Earth too. Ever heard of a blue whale? Sperm whale? Hell, we've got tiny monsters that are arguably worse than your big ones. But Captain, General Hertuck interjected, the environmental suits required to survive on Kepler 442b would need to withstand environmental suits? Sarah laughed, a sound that made several alien delegates visibly flinch. Admiral, we're talking about humans here. My great-grandfather worked in asbestos mines without proper protection and lived to be 93. My grandmother grew up during atomic testing in the desert and still runs marathons at 85. We don't need perfect environmental suits, just good enough ones. She stood up and walked over to what appeared to be a supply locker, pulling out a device that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts. This is a Mark 7 environmental protection unit. It's not pretty, but it'll keep you alive in hard vacuum for 6 hours, in a toxic atmosphere for 12, and in acid rain for about 3. After that, you start getting into what we call character building levels of discomfort. Admiral Zexville S. Scales had shifted to a pale yellow, indicating either amazement or terror. Captain, those specifications seem optimistic. Admiral, human engineering follows a simple principle. If it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid. This thing, she hefted the environmental unit, has kept miners alive in sulfur caves, researchers safe in volcanic vents, and rescue workers functional during chemical plant disasters. It's been field tested by people who think safety regulations are suggestions for other people. Lieutenant Rodriguez appeared on screen, carrying what looked like a massive rifle. Captain, we've got the mining charges and plasma cutters ready. The fabricators are working on additional acid-resistant plating for the shuttle. Oh, and Jenkins wants to know if he can bring his experimental sonic disruptor for the crystal monsters. Tell Jenkins yes, but only the Mark III version. We're doing a rescue mission, not testing experimental weapons of mass destruction? Sarah turned back to the screen. Admiral, how long before those people run out of whatever they're using for shelter? Environmental modeling suggests they have perhaps 40 hours before their emergency bunkers fail completely, Admiral Zexville replied. Sarah nodded. Perfect. That gives us 36 hours to get there and 4 hours to evacuate everyone. Rodriguez, what's our ETA to Kepler 442b at maximum burn? 32 hours, Captain, assuming we don't blow out the engine coupling again. And if we do blow it? 34 hours, but we'll arrive with emergency power only, Sarah shrugged. That's what backup generators are for. Admiral, we'll need detailed scans of the colony site, atmospheric composition data, and behavioral patterns for those crystal creatures. Also, if you've got any music from Kepler 442b's native radio frequencies, that would be helpful. Music? General Hertuck asked, clearly confused. Long story, but it turns out that certain frequencies can affect crystalline structures in unexpected ways. We discovered this during a mining operation on Titan. Sometimes the best way to deal with a problem isn't to fight it head-on, but to convince it to move somewhere else. The human ship's chief engineer appeared on screen, her uniform stained with what looked like engine grease and determination. Captain, I can give you 40% over-rated engine capacity for the trip, but I'll need someone to manually adjust the plasma flow every 6 hours. Done, I'll take first shift. Sarah turned back to the council representatives. Admiral, we're going to need one more thing. Of course, Captain. What do you require? Sarah's grin was distinctly predatory, the kind of expression that made prey animals on Earth instinctively run for cover. Clear us a direct flight path to Kepler 442b and make sure every Council ship stays at least 10 light-years away from the system. Why? Admiral Zexville asked, though he was already inputting the clearance codes. Because, Sarah replied, already heading off the bridge toward what appeared to be an equipment bay, we're about to show you why humans are the galaxy's preferred option for impossible rescue missions. And trust me, you really don't want to be close enough to see how we do it. The transmission ended, leaving the council chambers in stunned silence. After a long moment, Ambassador Kethver spoke for all of them. Did we just request help from a species that thinks a Death World survival mission sounds like fun? Admiral Zexville checked his readings one more time. I believe we did. And I think they're actually excited about it. In the distance, alarms began sounding as Waystation Gamma 7 cleared all traffic from the departure lanes. The humans were leaving, and everyone in the sector wanted to give them plenty of room to work. The UES absolutely nothing can go wrong. Dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, 31 hours and 47 minutes after leaving Waystation Gamma 7. The first thing that struck anyone looking at the human vessel was that it seemed to be held together with equal parts advanced engineering and what appeared to be metallic tape. Captain Sarah Chun stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display update with information about the planet that had defeated some of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. The readings were even worse than the Council's reports had indicated. Rodriguez, what are we looking at? She asked, taking another sip from what was apparently her 15th cup of coffee since departure. Surface temperature varying between -40 and +60 Celsius, atmospheric composition that's basically concentrated sulfuric acid with a side of chlorine gas and electromagnetic storms that are making our sensors think they're having nervous breakdowns, Rodriguez reported cheerfully. Oh, and the crystal creatures appear to be about 3 times larger than the Council estimates suggested. Anything else? The good news is that the colonists are still alive. I'm picking up faint energy signatures from what looks like emergency bunkers about 2 kilometers below the main colony site. The bad news is that those bunkers are surrounded by about 40 of the crystal creatures, and they appear to be trying to dig their way in. Sarah nodded calmly. Time until bunker breach? Based on current excavation rates, maybe 6 hours? These things are persistent. Right, engineering, how are our modifications holding up? Chief Engineer Martinez appeared on the internal com, her uniform now sporting several new stains and what looked like scorch marks. The acid-resistant plating is performing better than expected, Captain. The sonic disruptors are calibrated and ready. The emergency shelters are fabricated and loaded. And the crazy idea Jenkins had about using music, we've got it ready to deploy. Perfect. Sarah turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to the survivors down there. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of what was clearly an emergency bunker, pushed far beyond its design limits. The walls were corroded, jury-rigged repairs were visible everywhere, and the lighting was dim and intermittent. But the people inside were alive, alert, and organized. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth ship, absolutely. Nothing can go wrong. I understand you folks are having some trouble with the local wildlife. The response came from a tall, 4-armed Korthani who was clearly in charge. Captain, I am Colony Administrator Vorthak. We are surprised to receive any response to our distress call, much less from humans. Are you aware of the conditions on this planet? Administrator, my people have a saying. Been there, done that, survived the t-shirt. We're here to get you and your people off this rock before it gets any more unpleasant. Captain, with respect, we have tried every conventional evacuation method. The atmospheric conditions make normal transport impossible, and the crystalline predators are about to have a very bad day, Sarah interrupted. Administrator, I need you to gather everyone in the most structurally sound bunker you have. We're going to make some noise upstairs, and things might get interesting. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. All right, people, this is what we trained for. Rodriguez, take us into the atmosphere. Martinez, I want full power to shields and engines. Jenkins, start broadcasting your crystal disruption frequency as soon as we breach the cloud layer. Captain, Rodriguez said as they began their descent. I'm reading massive electrical activity in the storm systems. If we get caught in one of those, then we'll add some lightning scars to go with our acid burns. Sarah replied matter-of-factly. It's not like we haven't been struck by lightning before. The ship shuddered as it hit the planet's atmosphere. Acid rain began pelting the hull with a sound like machine gun fire. The crystal creatures on the surface looked up at the approaching vessel, their massive forms shifting and moving with surprising grace for something made of living rock. Sonic disruptors active, Jenkins reported. Broadcasting on frequencies 2.7 to 8.4 terahertz. The crystals are. Wow, they're really not enjoying this music, Captain. On the surface, the massive crystal creatures began to emit sounds that could only be described as screaming. They abandoned their excavation efforts and began moving away from the bunker sites, their movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated. Phase 1 complete, Sarah announced. Now for the fun part. Rodriguez set us down right on top of the main bunker. I don't care if you have to use the crystal creatures as a landing pad. Aye, Captain. Though I should mention that our hull integrity is down to 73% from the acid. Hull integrity is for ships that don't have spare parts and determination. Martinez, how are the emergency shelters looking? Ready for deployment, Captain. Each unit can hold 50 people and has independent life support for 12 hours. They're also equipped with what Jenkins calls aggressive defense systems. Good, because we're going to need every advantage we can get. The ship touched down with a grinding crash that sent shock waves through the crystal formations surrounding the colony. Sarah grabbed her environmental suit and headed for the cargo bay, where her crew was already loading emergency supplies and evacuation equipment. Remember, people, she called out as they prepared to disembark. We've got 3,000 souls counting on us, hostile environment, giant monsters that are currently very annoyed, and about 5 hours before this whole planet tries to kill us even harder than it already is. Just another Tuesday, Captain, Rodriguez replied, checking her plasma rifle. That's the spirit. Jenkins, you're on crystal management. Keep playing that music and make sure nothing bigger than a house gets within 50 meters of our evacuation site. Martinez, you're in charge of getting people into the emergency shelters. Rodriguez, you're with me. We're going down into those bunkers to collect our passengers. As the cargo bay doors opened, revealing the hellscape of Kepler 442b in all its acid-soaked, lightning-struck glory, Sarah Chun took one last sip of her coffee and put on her environmental helmet. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced over the com, welcome to another day at the office. Let's go remind the galaxy why humans are the species you call when everything else has already gone wrong. The team stepped out onto the surface of the deadliest planet in known space, their equipment held together with determination and what appeared to be an excessive amount of metallic tape. Above them, lightning split the acid-filled sky, while around them the ground shook with the movement of crystal creatures the size of buildings, and somehow, impossibly, they looked right at home. The descent into the emergency bunkers was like dropping into the belly of a dying mechanical beast. Corroded metal walls wept acidic condensation. Emergency lighting flickered with the irregular rhythm of failing power systems, and the air recyclers wheezed with the sound of machinery. Pushed far beyond its design limits, Sarah Chun moved through the cramped corridors with the confident stride of someone who had spent her childhood exploring abandoned mine shafts and derelict factories. Behind her, Rodriguez carried emergency supplies while maintaining constant communication with the surface team. Captain, Rodriguez reported. Jenkins says the crystal creatures are staying back, but they're getting agitated. The music is working, but some of the bigger ones are starting to probe the edges of our sonic barrier. How big are we talking? Sarah asked as they reached the main bunker entrance. Jenkins estimates the largest one at about 40 meters tall and maybe 60 meters long. He's calling it Big Bertha and says it appears to be studying our setup. Sarah paused at the bunker door. Studying our setup? As in it's intelligent? That's what Jenkins thinks. He says its movement patterns suggest problem-solving behavior rather than just random aggression. The bunker door cycled open with a grinding sound that suggested the mechanisms were barely functional. Inside, Sarah found herself face-to-face with 3,000 beings representing 17 different species, all crowded into a space designed for maybe 500 people in an emergency colony. Administrator Vorthak approached immediately, his forearms moving in what Sarah recognized as a gesture of desperate hope among his species. Captain Chun, we cannot express our gratitude for your arrival. However, I must inform you that our situation has deteriorated further since our last communication. How much further? Sarah asked, though her expression suggested she was prepared for any answer. The structural integrity of this bunker complex will fail within 3 hours. The acid seepage has compromised the lower levels, and the crystal creatures have damaged several support columns with their excavation attempts. Sarah nodded calmly and activated her suit's communication system. Martinez, what's the status on those emergency shelters? Deployed and ready, Captain. I've got 12 units set up on the surface, each one capable of holding 50 people. The defensive systems are active and the life support is running smoothly. Good, Rodriguez. Start organizing groups of 50. Priority to families with young ones, elderly, and anyone with medical conditions. Everyone else gets grouped by species compatibility for life support efficiency. As the evacuation began, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. The colonists were moving with remarkable efficiency and calm, despite being trapped on a planet that was actively trying to kill them. There was no panic, no fighting over evacuation priority, just organized cooperation between 17 different species. Administrator, Sarah said, your people are handling this crisis remarkably well. Vorthak's expression would have been a smile if his species had facial muscles that worked that way. Captain, we have been living on this planet for 2 years. We learned very quickly that survival required cooperation, adaptability, and what you humans call thinking outside the box. What made you choose this particular death world for a colony? Sarah asked as they supervised the evacuation of the first group. Kepler 442b has the largest known deposits of crystalline matrices in the galaxy. The materials here could revolutionize our technology if we could find a way to harvest them safely. Sarah's attention snapped to full focus. You mean those crystal creatures we're dealing with? They're made of the stuff you came here to mine? Precisely. The living crystal formations are incredibly complex, with properties that our scientists believe could lead to breakthroughs in computing, energy storage, and faster-than-light communication. Over the communication system, Jenkins' voice crackled with excitement. Captain, I'm reading some very interesting data from these sonic scans. The crystal creatures aren't just intelligent, they're networked. They're sharing information through harmonic resonance. Sarah's mind began working through the implications. Jenkins, can you isolate the communication frequencies? Already on it, Captain. And you're not going to believe this, but I think they're trying to talk to us. The evacuation continued while Jenkins worked on decoding the crystal creatures' communication attempts. The first 6 emergency shelters were filled and sealed, their occupants safe from the acid rain and toxic atmosphere, while the surface team dealt with increasingly curious crystal beings. Captain, Rodriguez reported, we've got a problem. Big Bertha is approaching the evacuation site. The sonic barriers are keeping her back, but she's trying different angles, like she's probing for weaknesses. Sarah made a decision that would have seemed insane to most species in the galaxy. Tell Jenkins to stop the defensive music and try to establish communication. Captain, Administrator Vorthak interjected, that creature could destroy your entire operation with a single movement. Administrator, my species has a long history of trying to talk to things that could easily kill us. Sometimes it works out better than fighting. On the surface, Jenkins shut down the sonic disruptors and began broadcasting what his analysis suggested might be basic mathematical concepts in the crystal creature's harmonic language. The response was immediate and unexpected. Big Bertha approached the evacuation site slowly, her massive form moving with deliberate care to avoid damaging the human equipment. When she reached the perimeter, she began generating complex harmonic patterns that made the ground vibrate like a massive organ. Jenkins, what's she saying? Best translation I can manage, Captain. Small ones? Why do you take the trapped small ones from the ground? The acid time comes soon, and the ground homes will fail. Sarah stared at her communication device for a moment, processing the implications. Jenkins, ask her if she knows a safe place for the small ones to wait out the acid time. The harmonic conversation that followed involved sound frequencies. that made every piece of equipment on the planet vibrate sympathetically. When Jenkins finally translated Big Bertha's response, it changed everything. "Captain, she says the deep caves beneath the crystal formations are acid-resistant and have breathable atmosphere. She wants to know if we would accept help from the Singing Stone people to save the soft small ones." Sarah looked around at the ongoing evacuation. The failing bunkers, the acid rain, and the massive intelligent crystal being that was offering to help save 3,000 lives. She made the kind of decision that had made humans the galaxy's go-to species for impossible situations. "Tell Big Bertha we accept her offer, and ask her if she'd be interested in a trade agreement once we get everyone to safety." Rodriguez looked at her, Captain, with the expression of someone who had served with humans long enough to know that this was somehow going to work out. "Captain, are you seriously planning to negotiate a mining contract with a giant crystal monster in the middle of a rescue operation?" Sarah Chung grinned the kind of grin that had made human diplomats legendary throughout the galaxy. "Rodriguez, my grandmother always said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Besides, who better to help mine crystal formations than the crystal formations themselves?" Above them, Big Bertha's harmonic laughter made the entire planet ring like a bell. The crystal caves beneath Kepler 442b defied every expectation the galaxy had about hostile planetary environments. Where the surface was a nightmare of acid rain and electromagnetic storms, the underground chambers were vast, stable, and filled with clean, breathable atmosphere that seemed to be naturally maintained by the living crystal formations. Sarah Chun walked through caverns that stretched beyond the range of her suit's lights, watching as 3,000 colonists settled into what Big Bertha had called the deep safe places. The crystal creatures had carved out individual chambers for different species, somehow knowing exactly what environmental conditions each group required. "Captain," Rodriguez reported, "atmospheric readings are better than anything we could have achieved with our emergency shelters. Temperature is a steady 22 Celsius, humidity at optimal levels, and oxygen content that's perfect for most of the species we're carrying." "How are they doing this?" Sarah asked, running her hand along a crystal wall that seemed to pulse with gentle, internal light. Jenkins appeared from around a corner, his scanner array beeping excitedly. "Captain, this is beyond anything in our databases. The crystal formations are actively managing the atmospheric composition. They're filtering the toxic surface gases, extracting clean water from atmospheric moisture, and somehow generating oxygen through a process I can't even begin to understand." Administrator Vorthak approached, his forearms moving in patterns that indicated wonder and gratitude. "Captain Chun, in 2 years of colony operations, we never suspected this level of sophistication from the crystalline life forms. Our surveys indicated simple mineral structures, perhaps some basic collective behavior, but this is a fully functional ecosystem," Sarah finished, "and we've been thinking of it as a mining opportunity." The harmonic conversation between Jenkins and Big Bertha had continued throughout the evacuation process. What they learned challenged fundamental assumptions about life, intelligence, and planetary colonization that had guided galactic civilization for millennia. "Captain," Jenkins called out, "Big Bertha wants to show us something. She says it's important for the soft small ones to understand before they make decisions about the Singing Stone world." Sarah followed Jenkins deeper into the crystal caves, through passages that seemed to be growing around them as they walked. The walls became more complex, showing intricate patterns that reminded her of circuit boards or neural networks. But on a scale that dwarfed any technology she had ever seen, they emerged into a chamber, so vast that their lights couldn't reach the far walls. The entire space was filled with crystal formations that sang in harmonies too complex for human minds to fully comprehend. And in the center of it all was something that made Sarah stop breathing for a moment. "Is that what I think it is?" she whispered. Before them, suspended in a lattice of crystal structures that pulsed with soft light, was a small planet. Not a model or a representation, but an actual world, complete with continents, oceans, and what appeared to be weather systems. "Captain," Jenkins said, his voice filled with awe. I think this is their nursery. Big Bertha's harmonic explanation took nearly an hour to translate, but the story it told revolutionized their understanding of crystalline life. The crystal creatures weren't just living on Kepler 442b, they were Kepler 442b, the entire planet, was a single vast organism, and what they had thought were individual creatures were more like mobile organs or specialized appendages. The small world suspended in the chamber was the next generation, a young planet that would eventually be launched into space to find its own star system and begin the long process of growing into a full world mind. So when we started mining operations, Sarah said slowly, we were essentially performing surgery on a living being without anesthesia. That appears to be correct, Captain, Jenkins confirmed. But Big Bertha says her world mind doesn't blame the soft small ones. She says young minds often don't understand what they're doing until they learn better. Sarah activated her communication system. Martinez, Rodriguez, I need you both down here immediately. And bring the emergency supplies, all of them. Captain, Administrator Vorthak asked, what are you planning? Administrator, I'm planning to do what my species does best when we accidentally cause a problem. We're going to fix it, make it better than it was before, and turn the whole situation into something everybody benefits from. When Martinez and Rodriguez arrived with the supply crates, Sarah began unpacking medical equipment, atmospheric processors, and what appeared to be several large musical instruments. Jenkins, I need you to ask Big Bertha if her world mind would be willing to accept help with the young planet's development process. Martinez, start setting up atmospheric processors to create clean air zones on the surface. Rodriguez, see if you can establish communication relays between the surface and down here. Captain, Martinez asked, what exactly are we doing? We're establishing the galaxy's first symbiotic colony. The crystal world mind gets help nurturing her offspring. The colonists get safe living space and access to crystalline technology, and everyone benefits from what might be the most advanced planetary management system ever discovered. As the human crew worked, the colonists began emerging from their temporary shelters to explore the crystal caves. What they found amazed them, chambers specifically designed for their research needs, living laboratories where crystal formations grew and shaped themselves according to the colonists' requirements, and communication systems that allowed real-time collaboration between 17 different species. Captain, Rodriguez reported, I'm getting signals from the surface. The Galactic Council fleet has arrived at the edge of the system. Sarah grinned. Perfect timing. Open a channel to Admiral Zexthal. The holographic display showed the Council chamber, where every delegate was leaning forward with expressions of intense curiosity and barely contained anxiety. Captain Chun, Admiral Zexthal began, our senses indicate that you have successfully evacuated the colonists. But we're reading some unusual energy signatures from the planet. Is everyone safe? Admiral, everyone is not only safe, they're better housed than they were in the original colony. I'm transmitting coordinates for the new settlement. You're going to want to send your best xenobiologists and diplomatic teams. Diplomatic teams? General Herdick asked. Captain, what exactly happened down there? Sarah's expression was the kind of calm satisfaction that made other species nervous when they saw it on human faces. Well, Admiral, it turns out we weren't conducting a rescue mission on a hostile planet. We were accidentally performing first contact with the most sophisticated planetary intelligence in known space. The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in her environmental suit. Captain, Admiral Zexthal finally asked, are you telling us that the entire planet is alive? Admiral, I'm telling you that Kepler 442b isn't just alive, it's raising a baby. And it just offered to teach us how to build living worlds that can take care of themselves. In the crystal caves below, Big Bertha's harmonic laughter made the entire planet sing with joy, while 3,000 colonists discovered that sometimes the most dangerous places in the galaxy turn out to be the safest, once you know how to listen. 6 months after the Kepler 442b incident, the Galactic Council chambers had been completely redesigned to accommodate a new type of delegate. Where once there had been seats and platforms designed for various biological species, there was now a section of living crystal formations that pulsed with gentle light and communicated through harmonic frequencies that made the entire station sing. Captain Sarah June stood before the assembled representatives, no longer wearing a makeshift environmental suit, but dressed in what appeared to be clothing woven from crystalline fibers that shifted color based on her mood and health status. The fabric was a gift from Big Bertha's world mind, part of the technological exchange that had revolutionized galactic civilization. The Kepler 442b Accords have been successful beyond our most optimistic projections, Sarah reported to the Council. The symbiotic colony now houses over 50,000 residents from 43 different species, all working in partnership with the planetary intelligence. Admiral Zexthal, whose scales had permanently shifted to the blue-green of amazement since the first contact, gestured with one claw toward the crystalline delegate section. Captain, could you explain to the newer council members exactly how this partnership functions? Sarah smiled, the kind of smile that had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Admiral, it's actually quite simple. The planetary intelligence provides housing, atmospheric management, resource processing, and protection from environmental hazards. In exchange, the residents provide the planet with new ideas, different perspectives on problem solving, and assistance with raising what we've learned to call seed worlds. The harmonic response from the crystal delegate was too complex for most species to understand directly, but the translation systems had been upgraded to handle the planetary intelligence's communication style. The world mind of Kepler 442b expresses gratitude for the small, soft-thinking ones who bring new songs to the planet song, the translator announced. She particularly enjoys the mathematical compositions from the Zirathi researchers and the emotional harmonies from human musical performances. Ambassador Kethver raised one of his 4 arms. Captain, our engineers are still struggling to understand how the living crystal technology works. The applications seem limitless, but we cannot replicate the growth patterns. That's because you're thinking about it backwards, Ambassador, Sarah explained. You're trying to build crystal technology. What you need to do is ask crystal technology to build itself. The planetary intelligences don't manufacture things, they grow them, and they're happy to teach us how to work with crystal life forms. But it requires a completely different approach to engineering. She activated a holographic display that showed the current status of the Kepler 442b colony, where the original settlement had been a collection of artificial structures fighting against the hostile environment. The new colony was seamlessly integrated with the planetary ecosystem. Buildings grew from the ground as needed. Atmospheric processors were living organisms that evolved to match the requirements of different species. And the transportation system consisted of crystal creatures that enjoyed carrying passengers and cargo. The young planet in the nursery caverns has reached maturity and will be launched toward the Vega system next month, Sarah continued. 3 other planetary intelligences have requested colonies, and we have waiting lists from over 200 species interested in symbiotic settlements. General Herdick leaned forward with interest. Captain, what about the military applications of this technology? Sarah's expression became serious. General, the planetary intelligences have made it clear that their technology will not be used for aggressive warfare. However, they're very enthusiastic about defensive applications. A planet protected by a world mind is essentially impregnable to conventional attack. How so? Admiral Zexthal asked. Admiral, imagine trying to invade a world where the ground itself is intelligent and actively hostile to your forces. The mountains can move, the atmosphere can be adjusted to make your equipment malfunction, and every rock on the surface can potentially serve as a surveillance device. Plus, the planetary intelligence can communicate instantly with other world minds throughout the galaxy. The implications of this revelation sent excited chatter through the assembled delegates. A defense system that could not be conquered, only befriended, represented a fundamental shift in galactic military thinking. Ambassador Yuthara, who had been the first to suggest contacting humans for the original rescue mission, spoke up. Captain, how did humans adapt so quickly to working with planetary intelligences? Other species are still struggling with basic communication protocols. Sarah laughed, the sound making several of the crystal formations chime in harmonic appreciation. Ambassador, humans have a saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. We've always been good at adapting to new environments and finding ways to work with whatever we encounter. Plus, my species has been talking to things that might or might not be intelligent for thousands of years. Trees, pets, machines, storms, the ocean ... Talking to a living planet. Isn't that much stranger than talking to your car? When it won't start? The harmonic laughter from the crystal. Delegate section created resonances that made the entire station ring like a bell, a sound that had become the signature of world mind amusement. There is one more development that the Council needs to be aware of, Sarah continued. The world minds have been sharing information through their harmonic communication network. They've discovered something interesting about galactic history. She activated another display, this one showing star charts that reach back millions of years. It appears that planetary intelligences are not rare. They're actually the natural end state of planetary evolution, given enough time and the right conditions. The galaxy is full of sleeping world minds that could be awakened with the right approach. The silence that followed was profound. Every delegate understood the implications immediately. The galaxy was not an empty space with scattered pockets of life clinging to random worlds. It was a vast community of planetary intelligences, most of whom had been dormant for eons, waiting for someone to learn how to speak their language. Captain, Admiral Zexfel asked quietly, how many worlds are we talking about? Conservative estimates suggest at least 30,000 planetary intelligences within our current exploration range, Sarah replied. The world minds believe that number. Could be closer to 100,000 once we learn how to detect dormant planet songs. The chamber erupted in excited discussion as delegates began contacting their home governments with the news. The galaxy they thought they knew was about to become a much larger and more interesting place. Sarah watched the chaos with satisfaction, then activated her personal communicator. Jenkins, how are the preparations going for the next rescue mission? All set, Captain, Jenkins replied from somewhere in space. The distress call came from a mining operation in the Rigel system. Apparently they're trapped in caverns beneath a planet with living lava flows and sentient rock formations. Sarah grinned and headed for the door. Sounds like just another Tuesday. Fire up the engines, Jenkins. Time to go introduce another planetary intelligence to the galactic community. As she left the council chambers, the harmonic song of the crystal delegates followed her, a melody that spoke of gratitude, friendship, and the endless possibilities that opened when different forms of life learned to understand each other. Behind her, Admiral Zexfel turned to Ambassador Yathara. Tell me again, why did we think asking humans for help was a good idea? Yathara's response carried the wisdom of someone who had watched humans turn an impossible rescue into galactic first contact and a trade agreement into a revolution in planetary science. Because, Admiral, when everything goes wrong, humans don't just fix the problem. They make friends with it, teach it to dance, and then invite it to join the family. The harmonic laughter from the crystal delegates suggested that the planetary intelligences thoroughly agreed.